Almighty God, who in the infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor as thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Let thy blessing descend upon us here in this Parliament assembly, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge, all which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. House resumes, but before we start, I just wanted to highlight some key important issues, small issues. One, I'm urging all members of the Honorable House to maintain the decorum of Parliament. So you need to stay in your seat that you are assigned to. Another matter is all members, when you're addressing the chair, you need to stand. You know, so you could be identified. So I could say my eyes fall on you and you proceed. Also, something that's really disturbing is members on both sides need to minimize the distraction and disturbances of each other. I don't want the house to be like stiff. We must have a little excitement in between, you know. But there are certain things I was not really happy about on both sides, where a member is speaking, and even on the member's own side, they are actually there in crosstalk with other colleagues, while their member is actually on the floor. This has to stop on both sides. I will not accept that, because this is not reflecting good on us. So, and I apologize for the late start, but we had to deal with some administrative matters brought to my attention. And I had a little discussion with the opposition because they requested to meet and discuss. So we had a tete-a-tete discussion, which will continue. All this is in the interest of really trying to ensure that we have fruitful debate, respectable debate, you know, and I think all that would be in the interest of the legislature and for Dominica. So as I said, House resume, debate continue. Yes, I recognize the Honorable Senator Kasani Lavin, Minister of Works.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to express my most sincere greetings to the members of Parliament in this House. Please allow me also to greet the invited guests here, all the listeners, viewers on various platforms, my family, my friends, my neighbors who I grew up with in Maho, Massac, Kinfield, Jimit, Warner, Campbell, Taro, and Layupak, where I farm, Mr. Speaker. Greetings to all Dominicans. Mr. Speaker, to say it's merely an honor or a privilege to be here to present today would be diminishing these words. So instead, Mr. Speaker, I simply say I give thanks to God. I give thanks also to the people who for the past 2.5 years, Mr. Speaker, and for the past 22 years also, Mr. Speaker, have allowed and entrusted the administration of the most important business, Mr. Speaker, into the hands of the Dominica Labour Party government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I think about the good people of Dominica, I think of a people who not so long ago were enslaved, who were not so long ago oppressed, stripped from their freedoms, the most basic dignities, Mr. Speaker, for a few to get wealthy, Mr. Speaker. I think of a people who for generations have been oppressed, Mr. Speaker, fraught with so many challenges, Mr. Speaker. I think of a people who are left to survive in a geopolitical landscape with countries with economies that are much more sophisticated than our own, with militaries and armies, Mr. Speaker, with generational wealth that was amassed from our sweat, from our blood, Mr. Speaker. But when I think of Dominica, I also think of the many people who will live here, who were born here, Mr. Speaker, people of faith, people who are blessed to be Dominican. When I think of Dominica, I think of a people, Mr. Speaker, who are loving, who are resilient, who are strong, people who go through challenges with such grace that you think, Mr. Speaker, that everything was all right. I think, Mr. Speaker, of a people who most recently had to go through serious environmental challenges, Tropical Storm Erica, Maria, the earthquakes in the north, Mr. Speaker, flooding at Layu, so many more. People who had to survive in the late 90s, Mr. Speaker, misgovernance by UWP administration. Mr. Speaker, I think of our people who recently have been going through, and even now, the COVID-19 pandemic, and who were affected by politics of the globe, Mr. Speaker, and warfare right now in Ukraine and Russia. Notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, I think of a people in Dominica, more than anything, we know how to rise to the occasion, to the challenge, Mr. Speaker, despite our many limitations. And just like long ago in biblical days, as Zacchaeus, Mr. Speaker, who was very short in stature, who wanted to see Jesus in the thick crowd, Mr. Speaker, what he did was to surpass his limitation and climb that sycamore fig tree to see Jesus Christ, Mr. Speaker. And so too in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, so too shall we rise. And when we rise, Mr. Speaker, we will see beyond the horizon, Mr. Speaker. We will see beyond the peaks in Mono Diab in the north, Mr. Speaker, and Mont Plateau in the south. We will see beyond the bays in Maho, Mr. Speaker, even to the more turbulent tides in Rosalie Bay in the east, Mr. Speaker. And when we see beyond the horizon, Mr. Speaker, we will see the opportunities. And just as we do as a government, we'll embrace each and every opportunity for the upliftment of our good people of Dominica. Mr. Speaker, this 2022-2023 national budget is presented in this spirit, in a spirit of humility, in a spirit that is realistic, in a spirit of hope, in a spirit of honesty, Mr. Speaker. And for these reasons, I absolutely pledge my support to the national budget, Mr. Speaker, 2022-2023. Mr. Speaker, permit me at this time to salute the leadership of our party, of our government, Mr. Speaker, in the person of Dr. the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, a man with resolve, a leader who embodies all the virtues of commitment, Mr. Speaker, a man who leads with pride, with absolute honor, with dignity, who puts people first, Mr. Speaker. But while we have this on our side, Mr. Speaker, on the other side, they are left wanting. They are left wanting, and you could hear it yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and the day before. It was clear, because what they did with their time instead was to plant seeds of confusion and throw twines of zebgua, as you say it, and vines around our necks to cause confusion, Mr. Speaker. So permit me at this time instead to uproot the seeds of destruction, Mr. Speaker, and bring some clarity to some of these things. Mr. Speaker, I heard them saying that on this side we have a habit of issuing no-bid contracts. Not this government, Mr. Speaker, not this one. Not this government that just a few years ago, we enacted a procurement act, that which a few years later, just earlier last year, Mr. Speaker, it was repealed, it was replaced, Mr. Speaker, and now we have the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, Mr. Speaker. Not this government. Not this government that the very same Director of Audit report that they are picking and choosing from, but not seeking to portray the real true picture, Mr. Speaker, where it says in one section, the works were undertaken in an economic and efficient manner as per design specifications and compliance with authorities, Mr. Speaker. Over and over it says this. It speaks of procurement, Mr. Speaker, and a few pages below. Again, the Ministry of Public Works and Digital Economy managed the project in an efficient and economic manner that ensured compliance with international standards and best practices and relevant laws and regulations. In the tender analysis, the tender process was based on pre-qualification procedures in the same document. So we play this game of picking and choosing. We need to practice honesty in this house, Mr. Speaker. This is not a circus, Mr. Speaker. Let's speak the truth. Words have power. Mr. Speaker, we had to withstand a lecture on love yesterday, Mr. Speaker. I cringed. I'm not saying that they're incapable of loving at all, Mr. Speaker. But to even fathom hearing UWP giving a Labour administration a lecture on love, Mr. Speaker, can you imagine this? A party that has been baptized and steeped in progressive principles and values, Mr. Speaker, built to represent the interests of the common man, Mr. Speaker, not us. Save that lecture. You could see their stature, Mr. Speaker, when they spoke. They rose and spoke about big figures, Mr. Speaker, in this house. How their eyes, it glowed, Mr. Speaker. How they increased in size and stature, Mr. Speaker. But when they spoke about love, they diminished, they reduced in size, Mr. Speaker. And they had to read about love and about people, Mr. Speaker. Spare me. Mr. Speaker, agriculture on its knees. That's what they said. And yet, my dear friend and colleague, Honorable Grant, was attacked. Even his age, he's young, was brought into question. He's my schoolmate. Went to college together. And his age was brought into question, Mr. Speaker. But may I submit, Mr. Speaker, that for the 2.5 years that Honorable Grant has been leading the thrust and the mandate of agriculture, we're in a much better circumstance than the 32 years, Mr. Speaker, of experience that they are boasting, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations, Honorable Grant. And the only people that want bended knees, Mr. Speaker, people like me, people like you. Because when UWP was in power in the 1990s, I was in high school, Mr. Speaker, and we have to wear long pants in Parliament. If I had shorts and I rolled up my pants, you would see the scars on my knees. Mr. Speaker, they came here speaking about electricity. Mr. Speaker, we all know the challenges of electricity, but they are not sufficiently qualified to speak or even ask about electricity because they gave away the power company, the people's company, like a mere subsidy, Mr. Speaker. And they come here acting confused, like they don't understand the mechanics behind VAT and the premise of VAT. And that they don't understand the calculation of fuel surcharge, that which is published in the papers every month, Mr. Speaker, so it suggests that they don't read. It took this administration, Mr. Speaker, to right that wrong, Mr. Speaker, and the people should feel pleased and comforted by that. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, one of my colleagues on this side asked that we give the public officers, the police, a round of applause. and not one single person on the other side clapped, Mr. Speaker. We have the Sergeant of Arms is here. We have 4 police officers in here. They all witnessed. Not one single applause from them, Mr. Speaker. This is quite concerning. We are taking politics way too far, Mr. Speaker, beyond basic sensibilities and humanity, Mr. Speaker, and that is dangerous. Mr. Speaker, I heard what was like a charade when mention was made of that the debt to GDP ratio is 106%, Mr. Speaker. This Labour administration met an extremely high debt to GDP ratio in 2000. That which was brought down a few years down to 64, Mr. Speaker. 64%. We suffered the tragedies of Tropical Storm Erica, where it reduced our GDP. It was knocked down by over 100%. 2 years later, Erica, 226%, Mr. Speaker. And we come here like it's a show talking about 106% debt to GDP ratio, Mr. Speaker. It suggests to me that they're anti-investment. Because debt is not bad, Mr. Speaker. Many of us in here have come to own whatever we have by debt, by loans, Mr. Speaker. To suggest that debt is a bad thing, they must not understand basic economics, Mr. Speaker. The fact that we on this side see debt as investment. Investment debt, Mr. Speaker. Should we have, Mr. Speaker, decided to continue these IMF measures forever, Mr. Speaker? Yes, the debt to GDP ratio decreased after these measures down to 64%, Mr. Speaker, but we had to invest. How can you look at only one single indicator when evaluating an economy, Mr. Speaker, and not look at any other matrix, Mr. Speaker? You're not looking at your asset base, Mr. Speaker. The 12 health and wellness centers that we now have, the new hospital in Marigot, Mr. Speaker, the new Dominica China Friendship Hospital, and so many assets that we have built, the investments in the digital economy, which will help us to pay back these debts, the increased cruise calls and visitor arrivals, Mr. Speaker. All these will stimulate the economy, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're about, a government of investment. Mr. Speaker, we heard one of them on this side, Mr. Speaker, suggesting that the business between Dominica and China is done in secret briefcases, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned when I hear these assertions, Mr. Speaker. If they on the other side were given a chance to manage the foreign policy agenda, Mr. Speaker, of Dominica, is that how they would start, Mr. Speaker? By casting aspersions, Mr. Speaker, and attacking other countries, Mr. Speaker? Countries like the People's Republic of China, who have been our dear friend since 2004, Mr. Speaker, who have showed absolute commitment to the people, to the development of Dominica, Mr. Speaker. Attacking the NEP again, Mr. Speaker. They're very good at that, attacking the NEP. When we are actively engaging some of our NEPs in various discussions. Because you hear the agriculture pie, Mr. Speaker. You heard it from Honorable Grant yesterday, Mr. Speaker. And we know that some of our NEPs, those that are engaged in beautification and cleanup, work 3 days a week. And we've been talking about engagement, Mr. Speaker, further for the additional 2 days. And that's why we're looking at lands in some areas, Mr. Speaker, where we can invest in them too. So they can rotate, Mr. Speaker. 2 days it might be one crew, 2 days another, and they will benefit directly, Mr. Speaker, from the investments in agriculture, Mr. Speaker, and they will have control of that industry. To suggest that we are not interested in our NEP, we created it. But Mr. Speaker, most of all, what troubles me is when I heard that this government is not investing in the youth. We are not investing in giving skills to our youth. Mr. Speaker, I was absolutely troubled, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there was a man, Mr. Speaker, and this is a short story called Rip Van Winkle. A man, Mr. Speaker, who lived in America in the 1800s. And that man, Rip Van Winkle, Mr. Speaker, he walked up to the mountains and he met some Dutchmen and they were drinking liquor. And you know what happened, Mr. Speaker? They drank so much alcohol, they fell into a drunken stupor and they fell asleep. And they missed the entire American Revolution. Mr. Speaker, is this Rip Van Winkle on the other side, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, did the UWP administration miss the entire education revolution?
You cannot mention that. This is unparliamentary. You have to withdraw this. Yeah.
I withdraw.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, we have done well, Mr. Speaker, in this past fiscal year. We have done very well, and we should all be grateful. Mr. Speaker, when I think of the international airport, Mr. Speaker, I see so much hope, so much promise for our people, for our country. In the last year, you would have seen that we had to invest a lot of time to dealing with the administrative, bureaucratic, the nuances of the project related to land acquisition. And this year, we can well expect that there will be much more physical implementation, Mr. Speaker. So I look forward to that with tremendous optimism. Mr. Speaker, I will only mention the future housing program because Honorable Ostry maybe needs much more than an hour to tell you about the good things that has happened over the past 20-odd years in housing, Mr. Speaker. So I'll only speak to future housing program, Mr. Speaker. A tremendous program, designed, tailored, and fashioned for the young people of Dominica, for the working class, Mr. Speaker, of Dominica, people who have done almost everything well. They have gone to school, they're law-abiding citizens, they have returned to their homeland to invest, to live here, or true patriots, Mr. Speaker. And in some cases, because of whatever circumstance that they encounter, Mr. Speaker, they just simply need a hand up, just a little push, Mr. Speaker. And in this future housing program, what we intend to do as a government, Mr. Speaker, is to bring them into our full circle of care, Mr. Speaker, as a government. So we will build homes in Cotton Hill and in Warner in the first instance, and later on we will consider Hillsborough Gardens and Center in Grand Bay. So the government will really be taking on all the risk associated with the construction. And we will take that on, and we have been working with financial partners. We have some banking institutions who have already agreed to finance this by as low as 4% interest rates, Mr. Speaker. And what the government will do upon construction, we'll sell these homes at a very reduced cost below market value. So this is absolutely a tremendous opportunity for empowerment and to build generational wealth. And I've been working very closely with about 27 young people, Mr. Speaker, on future housing program. They have committed their time and talent, people in the public service, private sector, business owners as well. And they have been working quite closely with us to develop residential policy, the community management plan, key concepts of these housing developments. And we should be all truly excited for this. So this budget is absolutely a budget for youth, a budget for young people, for working people. Mr. Speaker, I will go right back into my lane now. Infrastructure, public works, and digital economy. Mr. Speaker, last year I presented my report card, Mr. Speaker, Our Ministry Matters, Volume 1. And this year again, Volume 2 is ready to be circulated, Mr. Speaker. And it's all in there, our achievements, our accomplishments, our insights, Mr. Speaker. In our ministry, we have a mandate to administer and implement the physical and digital infrastructure of this country, and also to manage the water resources of Dominica, and we take that very seriously. Last year had not been easy, but we had to strategically prioritize based on importance to allow for sustainable growth, and that which we have, in fact, accomplished. Notwithstanding the challenges, we have completed the Wharton Waven Copthall Road Improvement Phase 2 project, Mr. Daniel is very happy for. It's a project that she certainly made tremendous representation for early on. So I'm happy for her, happy for the people of her constituency, Mr. Speaker. Layu Valley Road Reconstruction Project, Mr. Speaker, 4-kilometer road project. You know, we know the premise of this one. There was serious devastation in this area from flooding a few years ago from the collapse of the Mathieu Dam, a very important dam in Layu Park. And as a child, this is the road we used to use. Now I use the Warner route. So I myself, I'm happy about this opportunity to use this road as well. The people of Kahom, of Shapara, Dr. King, and Honorable Henderson, I see you all excited about this road. And just to let you know that work is on stream, it's steady, and we expect completion by December of this year. Marigot to Portsmouth feasibility study. As you all know, it's the government's intention to rehabilitate this 36.5-kilometer roadway from Borough Square, Portsmouth to Hatton Garden. So I am happy to also inform the opposition, Mr. Speaker, that the component, the wave overtopping mitigation measures, is incorporated in that project as well. Hence the reason that it appears suspended, Mr. Speaker. So take comfort in that. On the Cabanis wall, Mr. Speaker, it's in Dr. McIntyre's constituency. This is 70% completed, and it's also important to facilitate the works that are expected to come along in geothermal. And this is to a tune of $1.8 million, and we're happy about the progress of this work as well, Mr. Speaker. The Dublin Bridge is also complete at a cost of $1.02 million, also in Honorable Daniel's constituency, Mr. Speaker. The contractor in this case has gone beyond the call of duty. There are even flower planters, Mr. Speaker, that are part of this, and it was certainly not incorporated in the project. So that is the type of work, Mr. Speaker, that we are doing and facilitating in our ministry. It's more than just a contract, it's about people. The rehabilitation of Layu Bridge, it's something, or Hillsborough Bridge, as some of us may know it, $8.99 million. This was also completed in March of this year. We are all pleased to see this project, the Good Hope Road Reinstatement, Phase 1. I'm hearing Honorable Alfred saying yes. And mind you, it's Phase 1, as we're saying. It's 985 meters of road rehabilitation at a cost of about $850,000. Phase 2 is expected to come in due time, but we would like the opportunity to monitor this road, Mr. Speaker. As you know, some 37 years ago, I believe, there would have been a massive landslide in this area, so we would like to monitor possible soil movement before we invest further in a road surface, Mr. Speaker. Water interventions, we have done 3 retaining walls in that area to address some slope failures at a cost of $631,000. We've seen recently the river wall constructed, massive river wall, Mr. Speaker, in the upper riverbank area in Roseau. And as we know, in the last major flooding event, Hurricane Maria, we understand, Mr. Speaker, that a lot of the flood waters really emanated from that area, and that's where the breach happened to affect the city. So that has now been addressed, and we're all grateful for that. because we all benefit in some way from the city. We are here today in the city of Roseau, and hence the reason why we need to invest in the city. Mr. Speaker, LBR, Lubia to Bagatelle Road, and my colleague Minister Henderson is saying yes, he's extremely happy, and so too, in silence, I'm hearing the voice, the spirit of my dear brother Ed Regis, who last year sat over there, Mr. Speaker, and called this the Granby Road Project, Mr. Speaker. So you'd be pleased to know that we are making good progress in the tender process, and we're in the final stages of negotiations of this project, Mr. Speaker, at this time, and we expect to start in September of this year. And it's a 11-kilometer road project, which includes 5 bridges. 4 of them will be replaced, and the Mitcham Bridge actually will be rebuilt in a different area to improve the access, both the vertical and horizontal alignment, Mr. Speaker. The road width is expected to be about 6.5 meters throughout, except for the Pishland area, Mr. Speaker, where you have houses really at the edge of both sides of the road, and we will not interrupt the livelihoods of the people of Pishland, Mr. Speaker. So we're excited about this project. In the East Coast Road Project, Mr. Speaker, for the most part of last year, this project would have been administered under the Ministry of Environment, and they have done an excellent job, Mr. Speaker. And in this coming fiscal year, this project will be moved to the Ministry of Public Works, Mr. Speaker. And in large part because this project came as a package under the DVRP, Mr. Speaker, and most of these environmental projects would have now been completed and done very well, I must say. So this final component, which is really a public works project, has been moved to public works and digital economy. And it's a $126.7 million strategic investment, and we see the employment of no less than 150 people, Mr. Speaker, Dominicans, Mr. Speaker. And this project benefits numerous communities from the Bois Diab through Castle Bruce and the Kalinago territory all the way to Hatton Garden, Mr. Speaker. There are 174 culverts, Mr. Speaker, to be replaced. Most of them have been already, Mr. Speaker. 43 retaining walls, other drainage structures. Again, this project, the road width is expected to be about 6.5 meters. There are other projects, significant number of projects that we have accomplished, Mr. Speaker, in this year. We speak to the Grange Road Project in Portsmouth at a cost of $1.02 million. Both Senior Minister and my colleague Minister Douglas would be happy for this construction. The St. Kitts Bridge in Grand Fond is complete. We have retaining walls that were done very early on in Grand Bay, so we are happy for that. And the road at Highland, Mr. Speaker, was also completed. Mr. Speaker, it's an exhaustive list of accomplishments. I won't speak further to them. They're all here, documented in our report card, Mr. Speaker, so we will circulate it sometime for the benefit of all, Mr. Speaker, and to the public also. Mr. Speaker, in this new fiscal year, we will complete some of the projects that we have already started on, and one of them being the Dalis to Petit Savan Road. And while it's not presented in the estimates, Mr. Speaker, neither was it there last year, but yet we did quite a bit of work because we have been doing this under our road maintenance program, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to do so. So the major component right now to be done would be a bridge. There's a crossing in the area where the former police chief Daru lived. What we had was a swale, almost like a Ford crossing, Mr. Speaker. And if you see this area, it's completely damaged right now. And the cost of building a bridge in that area it's just way too costly. So what we have done instead, and we have been talking to Mr. Holford Vidal, a landowner, which is higher up, I believe, further east, and we are discussing acquisition. So we've been on site. There are discussions with our surveyors. The surveys have been done, and we're in the process of doing that. We have actually already designed the crossing, Mr. Speaker, but we're waiting to finalize the land acquisition. We'll also be doing the reconstruction of the important Wharton-Waven Mon Prosper Link Road, better known, like Dr. McIntyre would say, the Castle Road. And this is beneficial not only for his good people of the valley, but for the tremendous tourism product that we have in Dominica, Mr. Speaker. In the Roseau Enhancement Project, we will continue this, Mr. Speaker, Great Judge Street, and possibly soon after Independence Street. We spoke about this last year, Mr. Speaker, and we have accomplished quite a bit of work in this fiscal year, even though we have not done the physical work yet, Mr. Speaker. We can well appreciate the intricacies, the nuances of this project, Mr. Speaker, to rehabilitate a street in the heart of Roseau. The consultation process that has to go on, Mr. Speaker, the disruption of the lives and the businesses, we are taking that very importantly. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, what we have is we have a lot of underground utilities in this area, and we have to be satisfied that we have proper as-built drawings for these to minimize disruption. So we are very excited for this project also. In La Plaine, I heard representation was being made for some lights and some safety rails along the bridge. But I must say, Senator Joseph, that Honorable Kent Edwards has long made representation for these solar lights and for the safety rails, Mr. Speaker. He was one of the first power reps to make representation for safety rails. That's why in his constituency, we used our last set of safety rails in La Plaine, Mr. Speaker. So again, after we procure our 3,750 meters of safety rails, which we're in the process of procuring, we'll certainly address that and the lights as well. So next time, we don't need to wait for a year to come to budget address to make representation. We simply go to our respective power reps. Also, too, Honorable Charles will be very pleased that we have started the procurement process for a seawall in Scott's Head. And for Honorable Skerritt, we have started the procurement process for the Virgin Lane sidewalks too. So there's a lot that we should be happy for, a lot that we can expect. Again, it's all here, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of projects. I can't name all, but we can all refer to the 2022-2023 budget estimates. We have been devoting a lot of time and attention to maintaining our roads after we have invested millions of dollars into our physical infrastructure. We have to maintain. So last year, we spent $5.076 million for road surfacing, for pothole patching and general maintenance. And in all, 93,000 square meters of road surface would have been replaced by way of pothole patching and maintenance. And this may seem like a lot, but bearing in mind the environmental conditions, Mr. Speaker, the frequent wetting and drying cycles, the rain, the harsh sunshine, Mr. Speaker, and the temperature differences, bearing in mind the development that is happening in Dominica, where we have a lot of vehicles, and not only that, but with the significant construction, we have a lot of multi-axle vehicles traversing the roads, Mr. Speaker. We can well understand and imagine that we must have a rigorous road maintenance program, and we are committed to continuing that into the next fiscal year. I want to applaud the efforts of the many contractors who have been working with us, Mr. Speaker. There are many of them. You have the Alexanders in Granby. You have people like Marlon Labasea and Alicia Coffey and Public Works Corporation as well. So many people. On a given day, anywhere from 46 to 50 people would be on our roads maintaining around the island, Mr. Speaker. Also, too, Mr. Speaker, we have made tremendous efforts to invest in the water sector. And one of our major projects, our biggest project actually, would be the Water Sector Strategic Development Project. And we all know the ravages we have experienced of the many hurricanes and storms that we have had most recently, and we must make critical investments in our water sector. to ensure that service is maintained and delivered to a good people of the various communities in Dominica. So under this project, it is in 3 phases. The first phase identifies the various vulnerabilities in our water sector around the island. And the second phase, the final designs, the cost estimates would have been done, and we would have also prioritized the projects. So some of the projects that we will be doing or we will continue to do in this fiscal year, Mr. Speaker, would be the Rosa Valley Water Project, where the people from Trafalgar, Shawford, Fort Canny, Coptal, Wharton, Waven will all benefit. And on the West Coast, the entire West Coast, Mr. Speaker, the East Coast, Calibishi, Jimmet also, Mr. Speaker. So there's a lot going on, Mr. Speaker. And while not in this component, Mr. Speaker, but we have also made allowances for further investments in water. So in Boetica, you will have work done on your water supply in Cotton Hill and in Grand Coulibaly also, Mr. Speaker. So this, we see water, Mr. Speaker, as a basic need, Mr. Speaker. An investment that is absolutely needed for our people, Mr. Speaker. So when they on the other side are laughing about 106% debt to GDP ratio, we have no shame in investing in the people of Dominica, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the final stage of this project, we'll be investing in capacity strengthening and upgrades at Dawasco, and investing also in technology. This project is at a total of $107 million, Mr. Speaker, well worth it. And to a large component of that will be from the UK SIF, and it will also be matched by GOCD, government, and Dawasco. We also have seen in the last year upgrades to the WA1 network, Water Area 1 network, as we sometimes call it. A $33 million investment was made in that area. It is our largest water system on island, stretching from Castle Comfort all the way to Mero, Mr. Speaker. So we are happy about that. There's additional storage capacity at Antrim and at Massac. There is now a new pre-treatment and filtration plant at Antrim also, as well as a new laboratory. So all worthwhile investments in the water sector. Also to Mr. Speaker, in Mont Prosper, the water supply project, that has also been done. It's substantially completed, I would say. So far, we have completed the 60,000 imperial gallon tank. We have already completed, and that was done in Mont Prosper, and the water intake was completed in Wharton Waven also. And we are now finalizing the laying of the pipes to allow for connectivity and distribution. I wish to say thanks to BNTF for their $1.9 million investment, and government has also matched this with $1.1 million, Mr. Speaker, to complete that project. There are also investments in renewable energy at Dawasco as well. I wish to inform that a 97 kilowatt solar PV module project was done and installed at the Baytown treatment facility, and so too a 30 kilowatt PV module was done at Jimmet water pump station. So we have been doing a lot. Just to put into perspective, why do we need so much investment in the water sector? Just to take us back a little bit to 2015, where after Tropical Storm Erica, 30% of our water system would have been disrupted at a cost of $52.5 million. And in a matter of 2 years, the government and Dawasco did well. A massive job at providing distribution and restoring our network to 95%, only for Hurricane Maria to devastate and disrupt the network again, then by 45%. And this time the cost was a massive $104 million. So that is why we need to invest in resilience in our water system, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, digital economy. And I get so excited when I speak about digital economy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, simply put, we are focusing on the productive sectors, Mr. Speaker. Not that we are trying to find new areas necessarily, Mr. Speaker, but we are trying to think in new ways to bring different perspectives to to the way we think, the way we do things, Mr. Speaker. And with data being the new gold, Mr. Speaker, we absolutely need to be part of this gold rush. Mr. Speaker, that is why we believe that digital economy is right along that critical path to our dynamic Dominica, Mr. Speaker, and we have been doing well. Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely my pleasure to tell this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, that we have in fact completed our dynamic Dominica National Digital Transformation Strategy, Mr. Speaker. I would like to say thanks to the UNDP, Mr. Speaker, for working with us, being true development with consultations with various sectors, public, private, academia, the youth, you name it, even the seniors, Mr. Speaker, because digital economy affects all of us. And what we did was we completed our readiness assessment to identify gaps, opportunities that we could leverage upon, and that was the basis, the premise of the formulation of our national strategy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this document is about people, it's about government, it's about business. This strategy fosters an environment, Mr. Speaker, of technology adoption and digital skills from every child to every senior. It drives economic. It provides convenience to people by providing numerous services and allows people from outside to better transact with us here in Dominica. Mr. Speaker, it reduces time, it provides cost savings with doing business, it improves our score on the doing business index, Mr. Speaker. It invests and speaks heavily about what we'll be doing in the various productive sectors, Mr. Speaker, like education, healthcare, tourism, agriculture, and financial services, Mr. Speaker. So I will simply refer, Mr. Speaker, to page 25, Mr. Speaker, on the healthcare.
You have to ask permission to refer.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, in healthcare, we'll be focusing on the digitalization of healthcare, prescriptions, privacy and data protection, principles, protections and skills. We'll be developing our mobile and remote solutions, Mr. Speaker, and focusing heavily on telemedicine, Mr. Speaker. In the area of agriculture and fisheries, digitalization of information capture. Honorable Grant spoke to us about that yesterday.